I'd like to call the Select Board meeting for Monday, March 17th, 2025 to order. And note that we will be entering into executive session and returning no sooner than 6 p.m. Can I get a motion, Mr. Pekarsky?
Mr. Chair, I move to enter executive session for the following purpose, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for all town unions and non-union personnel and/or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and the chair has determined that open session will have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Select Board Member Kavanaugh is not here, so all in favor, Pete?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. 4-0, Joe. I'd like to call the Select Board meeting for March 17th, 2025 back to order, noting that we were in executive session and we took no action. If you would all like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seeing absolutely no staff, other than...
I don't know if it is online.
Doesn't look it. So, Joe, I'll start, and then you said you had something. All right. I just want to read for the record. I'm doing this now because at the end of the meeting, during Select Board members' discussion, no one's awake. So, I'm writing to convey how well staff on the front lines have treated me during my visit to town. Community Center employees gave a warm welcome at the Spaghetti Supper on March 7th. Andrew Riker of the Harwich Fire Department responded quickly to open my vehicle at Red River Beach when I mistakenly locked my keys inside my car. And several days this week, in the research area of the library, Alan Cahy helped me with my computer and guiding me with printing. The town of Harwich is a pleasure to visit because of all the people who work for the town. They are always friendly and helpful. I had a nice visit and I will return soon. So sometimes it's nice to acknowledge all the hard work of the people on the front lines of the town of Harwich that makes this amazing town of ours go. And then my last comment is I have to give huge congratulations to the Nauset boys hockey team. State champions, undefeated. Bill Galvin and I were there, and happy belated to you, by the way, Bill. And what an unbelievable game that was last night at the Boston Garden, and they won 4-1. So to our neighbors, one heck of a job from top to bottom, parents, kids, players, coaches, all-stars in every respect of the word. Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly great reports on your end. Unfortunately, mine's a little bit of a sad note, and I'm sure you've all read, but the Cape Cod community lost a giant and a great friend in the Cape Cod RTA Executive Director, Tom Cahier. I had the pleasure of working with Tom as my role here as administrator. My colleague in Brewster and I were working with him last week, in fact, on something where he was making routes better and making the Cape Cod RTA more accessible. And so on behalf of the town of Harwich, I'd like to put on our records that we offer our sincerest condolences to Tom's family and certainly his colleagues at the Cape Cod RTA. It was a shock to all of us. And I will be at the services tomorrow representing the town of Harwich, as my colleagues and I all serve on the board of directors for Tom. So just wanted to put out there that he was a good man, he did great things, and he will be very sorely missed. So we offer our condolences to the friends and relatives of Tom Cahier.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And seeing no other staff, we'll move to weekly briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. So the latest on the Phase 3 sewer extension construction, the look ahead is pretty much the same as last week, is that it was March 10th through March 21st. So again, nothing yet on the contract 1 East. Still working on 2 West in and around Chestnut Lane, Elm Drive, Martha Eden Court, Standish Woods Circle. And a lot of that work is expected to end ahead of the week of March 24th, which then it'll be more specifically in the area of Martha Eden Court and Standish Wood Circle, and all traffic restrictions in that area remain as previously identified. That concludes the weekly briefing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody for public comment and announcement? Matt, let me know if there's anybody with a hand up in a minute. Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Diana Preston, and I am on John Joseph Pond. I'm also a member of the Great Sand Lakes Association, as well as I'm a board member on the Harwich Ponds Coalition. I'm not speaking for any of those organizations tonight. A little bit of background: I grew up coming to the Cape. My father had grown up coming to the Cape. When I was growing up, my mother's parents rented cottages in East Ham and Orleans, and we stayed with them. I'm not sure how 3 generations survived together in rustic cottages with no phone or television, but we all loved it. My parents retired to the Cape. They chose to settle in Harwich and bought a house on John Joseph Pond 30 years ago. I regularly visited over the years. They passed away recently, and I've started making the house that they built my own. I've enjoyed kayaking, paddleboarding, and playing in the pond with my nephew and my cousin's children. I've also done long-distance swimming, including training for triathlons and swim bike races in the pond. So as we all are, I'm sensitive to water quality issues in the ponds and other water resources. Our complex sewering plan appears to be the best available option to improve and maintain water quality. When I found out about the funding made available through the State Revolving Fund for Phase 3A, it seemed almost too good to be true. My understanding is that we would be eligible to borrow money as needed at 0% interest. We would also be eligible for 3.3% principal forgiveness from the revolving fund and 25% from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. So if 31 million SRF funding is approved, the taxpayer should only be responsible for paying 22 million over the course of the project. If we wait even a year, we may not be able to get funding on these terms. There may be funding vulnerabilities and almost certainly increasing competition with projects elsewhere. Every year we wait also risks significant degradation of water quality in the Great Sand Lakes. My understanding is that this year there were 2 cyanobacteria blooms. While other ponds may have experienced water quality problems and cyanobacteria blooms over a longer period of time, they are not in the zones of contribution for our town drinking water wells. They're also not geographically contiguous with Phase 3 project and the Pleasant Bay watershed, nor were they included in the 2017 intermunicipal agreement with Chatham. Our drinking water may be excellent now, but we shouldn't take that for granted. It's not only residents that need clean drinking water, it's our businesses and our visitors too. I've been learning more about John Joseph and our other kettle ponds and the Monomoy lens of the aquifer that supplies the drinking water, not only for Harwich, but also for Brewster, Chatham, Orleans, Dennis, and part of Yarmouth. Our award-winning water department has information about some of this on the town website. The materials describe surface water bodies as windows into the aquifer. John Joseph Pond is 55 feet deep, so it may be more like a telescoping lens into the aquifer. Only Long Pond is deeper. Although Hinckley's and Seymour Ponds aren't in the zones of contribution for the drinking water wells, they're in another drinking water protection district. Like the Great Sand Lakes, they're also in a Zone 2 primary recharge area for the aquifer. Maybe time to turn more of our attention to the health of our kettle ponds. We could all benefit from more education about the aquifer and the Monomoy lens. Maybe our water department can partner with organizations that have education experience, like the Association to Preserve Cape Cod or the Harwich Conservation Trust, to provide materials and educational opportunities while residents and taxpayers consider the town's article and implications of 3A before the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Anybody else for public comment? I think Patrick Otten is online.
Yes, hello, good evening, Select Board.
Hi, Patrick.
Patrick Otten speaking.
Thank you.
East Harwich. I want to read a text message that I got from one of the teachers of the classrooms that Sky and I visit. May I do so for the record?
Of course.
Thank you. Here it begins. I read the bad news in Harwich and want you to know how much we appreciate and love Sky's visits. I have children in my class whose parents are addicts, are in jail, are abusive, or have abandoned them. A few of the children are living in extreme poverty. Your visits are so special and important to them. The kids are always so happy on Sky days. We are sorry for the controversy, but think you are both wonderful. That's the text message I just wanted to share with the board. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, hearing none, let's move to the consent agenda. Item A.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the Select Board meeting minutes from March 3, 2025 as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, Pete?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we designate Jennifer Harrington as the Inspector of Animals for 2025, specifically May 1, 2025 through April 30, 2026.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
You don't need to do roll calls.
Yeah, she's not on.
Right. I just remembered that. Thank you. Any discussion on Jennifer Harrington? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
I am going to take, if it's okay with the board, new business A out of order. Mark, if you'd like to
That's you.
come on up. Try to help you out a little if we can.
Sure.
Thank you.
So, Mark Drainville with GHD. So I am here, I have a presentation. So I want to just briefly say what this presentation is and what it is not. What it is a status update for what's been done to date. What it is not is, it's not an answer to Selectman Howell's question from last week, and that is where we're heading. I will be back to do that, to provide that information, so.
Thank you.
All right, so this is pretty brief, but so the town has 5 watersheds that require nitrogen removal in order to meet nitrogen TMDLs. A TMDL is total maximum daily load. That's a limit that is set for the health of that watershed. And the 5 are listed here: Allen Harbor, Witchmere Harbor, Saquatucket Harbor, Herring River, and Pleasant Bay. And the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, CWMP, contains 8 phases of sewering to meet the TMDLs in those watersheds. So this is a figure from the 2016 is when it was approved, CWMP. All of the colored areas are the different phases. The white areas are areas that don't have any sewering that's planned for them. So in 2023, in July, the Title V, which are the septic system regulations, were updated to include a requirement that communities that have nitrogen-sensitive estuaries submit watershed permit applications. And you have several of those, so you are subject to those regulations. What the regulations have in them is a requirement to achieve 75% compliance within the first 20 years. The watershed permit's going to be a 20-year permit, and the requirement is to achieve 75% compliance within 20 years. Okay? The exception to that is the Pleasant Bay watershed was on an accelerated schedule that preceded the 2023 regulations, so there's a little bit of an accelerated schedule, but for the west side of town, you're on the 20-year 75% goal there. So based on that, those regulations and the Pleasant Bay watershed, you are approaching a composite 45%, 45% of the way towards your 20-year goal. All right, so if you ask me, where are we right now, I'd say you're 45% of the way towards the 20-year goal.
Just if I could ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
So when did that 20-year goal clock start?
So it hasn't started yet.
Okay?
All right.
That's helpful to know, though.
It's going to start in a few years when the watershed permit application for the west side of town is submitted.
So we're 45% of the way there, the clock has not begun.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Add on to that?
Yeah, please.
And 45%, does that include what we've appropriated but not yet started to build? Or is that only the Pleasant Bay Bridge, Muddy Creek, and Phase 2?
It includes phase 3.
It also includes what we have not.
So when I say 45%, when that's in place, that's why you'll be at 45%.
Thank you.
Okay.
Remind me how many homes in Phase 3?
Oh, boy,
That's all right.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Approximately 628.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you look at your full compliance period, you're 37% of the way, okay? So if I had to say in a sentence where you are, in a sentence, that says where you are, okay? And then I just have a couple of quick slides about the next steps, and we'll talk a little bit about that more when I come back. But, so as far as the Pleasant Bay, so this one's a little bit different as far as your compliance requirements. You actually have to meet 100% of your goal for this one. And it's because you preceded, that watershed permit preceded the state regulations, all right? So you have to achieve 100% compliance, and you're actually on target to achieve that within 5 years. So once Phase 3 is in place, you will have achieved your goal in the Pleasant Bay, okay? As you know, all of your wastewater is going to Chatham, so that the wastewater treatment is occurring in Chatham, and your treated water recharge is occurring in Chatham. So the treated wastewater is being discharged in Chatham too. There is a requirement in your intermunicipal agreement that at some point you may have to take that back, so that might be an issue that has to be tackled in the future, but right now, in a few years, you'll be in full compliance with the Pleasant Bay permit. Okay? Any questions on that?
Can I quickly?
Please.
We want the recharge back, correct? Isn't it beneficial? And I'm not talking the quality of the recharge that comes back. I'm saying, in theory, having the recharge return is a good thing.
Yes, I mean, it's going to cost you, but
Yeah,
yes.
again, forget all
Yes.
that. I'm talking
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the benefit of our overall water supply.
Yeah, you'd want to recycle it back into where it came from.
Right.
So yes,
Okay.
yes, okay. But Chatham has the ability to take it now, and that's why it's staying there now, so.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get you wanted to wait, but just so you know, next week, we're going to button up the warrant, so there isn't a discussion after next week. You have to have something for us relative to the question I was asking. And the reason that I'm saying this now is you and I are not, you're talking apples and I'm talking oranges. You're talking about compliance in the sense that we have a plan in place for those three phases. I'm talking about aggregating 20, 25, 30 years worth of borrowing that just keeps becoming additive every time you put another phase into it. So the burden is not buttoned down. The identification and the process has begun. The other thing I'm a little concerned about, because it's getting thrown around an awful lot, and without, I don't have a horse in this race. I'm just trying to make sure that everybody has all the facts. I mean, clearly, there's something going on at Great Sand Lake, but the other part of this problem is when you add that to what we've already done, you have to borrow all of the money. It's not you borrow a little bit, you borrow a little bit more, you borrow a little bit more. You borrow all the money up front before June 30th so that you can submit it in for the IUP to get it locked in. Then they will have two different things that they're going to be able to do. Let you know whether it's 2% or whether it's 0%, and how much along the way they're going to be able to forgive of the principal. But those things aren't locked in perpetuity either, in terms of what they're obligated to do at the state level. So I'm trying to make sure that everybody has all the facts and that they're not conflated with other things that are going on that aren't factual.
Okay.
So it's real important to have those numbers by next week.
Okay, all right.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the discussion on the recharge of the treated effluent, remember that Mark was kind enough several weeks ago to provide a draft article, so there is a funding request for that exact topic that's in your draft warrant as well. And so maybe if we get to that later, if there are any questions, Mark might be able to educate us, but generally speaking, we already have that in the queue.
He's hinting you're staying.
That's fine, that's fine.
Misery loves company.
Thank you.
And I can actually, so portion of the town that hasn't received attention yet is the west side of town. There hasn't been any progress made on the west side of town, except there's some efforts been put in place to put a dry pipe into Route 28 that's part of the reconstruction project. So that's under, the design is near complete with that, waiting on Mass DOT to complete their design at this point. The primary needs on the west side of town are to identify both a location for treatment and a location for groundwater recharge. So as I said, for Pleasant Bay, you have treatment in Chatham, and right now you have recharge in Chatham, groundwater recharge in Chatham. On the west side of town, we don't have either. There are options as far as treatment goes. You can speak to your neighbors in Dennis about potentially taking flow at their new treatment facility there, or you can have your own treatment facility. So those are two options, and obviously both are being explored. On the groundwater recharge end, I can tell you that Dennis cannot take your flow like Chatham can take it. So as Joe mentioned about the recharge article, that is a critical component of the work on the west side of town. This is something that's driving projects on the Cape, is identifying a place to discharge your treated water effluent. So that would be the kind of the next critical step on the west side of town. So that's a summary of where you are, and I will be back next week to tell you where you're going.
I have a quick question, if I could. What is the ideal, oh, I'm sorry.
I believe it's the 31st?
Well, I need to come back next week.
Very good. Oh, for that, sorry.
Yeah.
What is the ideal area for the effluent discharge? What do you look for?
So the ideal area is an area that doesn't influence a surface water body. The reason that these sites are driving projects right now is the state has changed they have changed the way they look at these sites, and what happens is when you discharge your treated water into the ground, the groundwater table goes up a little bit right around where you're discharging. And if that, it's called a mound, if that mound impacts a surface water body, that causes an issue, and it becomes a little bit of a struggle to go too far with something like that. So you try to limit the amount of your mound, and that it's a little bit of a complicated issue where every community in this local area is dealing with it. Yarmouth, Dennis, obviously you are here too, and so Falmouth. I mean, there's a number of communities that are struggling with this right now. So I would say a site that doesn't have a nearby surface water body is a great site.
Is there a cost associated with this recharge site? Let's say we identify an area in Harwich that can accept Dennis's recharge, that we send them, they give it back. Is there a cost associated to that for us?
The only cost is the cost to pipe it over and pump it. But on the site itself, it's a very passive process. Once the water gets there, it just goes into the ground. So
Okay.
it's just the infrastructure to get it there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if we don't own it, it will certainly cost us money to buy it.
That will,
That's right. And
Mansfield, Norton, and Foxborough,
My
they
next
have a
point.
tri-town.
Yeah.
If you ever get a chance and you're driving through there, their operation is pretty impressive, and you can see the fields and how unobtrusive they are from their plant.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to what you were just saying, the pipe that takes it to Dennis is not going to be the pipe that sends it back for recharge, so there's definitely some infrastructure that we'd have to pay for, because you'd have to have an outflow back to us.
Joe?
And on that overall topic, the article that you talked about last week and the funding source, it's about $150,000 that we're looking to do the site research. So that's the first cost that we're going to bear on this project. However, the funding source is recommended to come from our special purpose stabilization for wastewater.
I was just going to comment. I believe we voted to support that last week, so I don't know that we're talking about it tonight.
Thank you. It was more if you had any questions.
Okay, gotcha.
On the technical aspect.
Perfect, thank
Yep,
you.
Thank you.
Is that it?
It's just through you to the town administrator. We did also do some preliminary site work. We've correct, through
We have.
Dan Pelletier. when he was-
We have been looking at it. It's a struggle but we have been doing some preliminary work.
Yep. And if I could,
Please.
since Dan's departure, we're still working on that. There's a specific ask to really ramp it up for the article.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and thanks again for being here.
So could I, there was one question that came up last week.
Please.
Would I be able to just also?
It's got to do with wastewater, I would say yes.
So there was a question that came from the public about the time of travel and groundwater. And the general rule of thumb, unless you actually go out and test it in a specific area, general rule of thumb on the Cape is the groundwater is moving about 2 feet per day. So just wanted to give that information out.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next week, if I understand that correctly?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And maybe later in the...
And maybe the week after, yes. So,
Thank you.
yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Mr. Chairman, you want to stay under new business?
Yeah, let's stay under new business, get a motion on B if we could, please.
Motion to approve a 2025 special permit for a one-day entertainment and event permit for the Harwich Conservation Trust. Meet Your Local Farmers event at the Harwich Community Center, 100 Oak Street. Event to be held on March 29, 2025, from 10 A to 2 P. Live and recorded music and amplification.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. 4-0, Joe.
Thank you.
Now we'll go back up to 2025 annual town meeting. Item A, draft 2025 annual town meeting warrant. Votes may be taken. And discussion on seasonal communities designation article.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this topic, if I could first direct you to the packet itself. Want to make sure we're all operating from the same songbook. So you should see a draft cover page that says annual town meeting warrant with recommendations. Talks about the first day and time of the town meeting, the location. In my packet, the next page is just to show you the draft of the article numbers. Do you have that next in your packet? Perfect. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, what you'll see is that we are presently at 60 articles for the 2025 annual town meeting, because a transfer article has been removed. That's going to be handled through a motion rather than an article. And then there's the ongoing discussion about money for the Historic District, Historical Commission. You know, your guidance is to have that in the operating budget, so that'll be there. However, I also want to let you know, or you may know, that the chair of the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust Fund and your representative, Mrs. Kavanaugh, and I met last week, so that the chair has been allowed to work with general counsel on a potential article to establish a separate attainable housing trust fund, the matter of which is being worked on by both the chair of that trust fund and council, with the understanding that we are striving towards your meeting on March 24th to hopefully be the closing of the warrant, so we can continue to expedite this process for May 5th. Next item would be, you have the track sheet, if you will.
Could I jump in prior to moving on from that?
Please.
So, and I know this is a draft, as you said, my only ask would be, it looks like, I think it's 5 of the petition articles fall within the last 9 articles of town meeting. Is there a chance to shuffle the deck and get some of those closer to the top of the list?
There certainly can, so if you want to talk about this, this was my effort to try to give you a warrant that flows, and so if I could, very quickly, what you'll see is Articles 1 through 10 are generally boilerplate articles or straightforward articles. They're all financial in nature. Then you get into a standard article of funding the Cape Cod Community Media Center. So then what's in there is, first you have a petitioned article, because it's still under the concept of finance, for the funds for anticipated expenses of the Harwich Home Rule Charter Commission. So that's the first of your petitioned articles. Then we get into further funding, so 13 through 19 are articles related to the capital plan. Article 20 is technically is related to the capital plan, if you're adding that to the plan, so that's the construction. I also want to point out, I misspoke last week, we still have to refer to the local phrase as Phase 3A to differentiate between old Phase 8. It still has to be referred to as the Great Sand Lakes Project, because that is how it was referenced in the existing CWMP and in the application. So we're not referring to it as the Great Sand Lakes Association Project, but we should not be referring to it outside of the town, boundaries of the town, as Phase 3A. Then you have your second petitioned article, which is Article 21, accept funds allocated for Great Sand Lakes Sewer Extension. And as it goes on and on, I was trying to incorporate them with like articles, regardless of how they were brought before the Select Board. Now, specifically to the raft of articles you have towards the end of the warrant, I will just put it out there, and we're going to talk next week at a motions meeting. It's my expectation that we're going to go 2 nights. And so what I was trying to capture in the later parts of that is the potential zoning bylaw article that you're aware of, that the planning board's working on amending the zoning bylaw for accessory dwelling units. So this is meant to have enough content the second night to ensure quorum. Having said that, this is a draft. The article numbers are your purview. No argument from me whatsoever in how you want to display them out.
Yeah, and again, those are my thoughts. I don't know where the rest of the board sits with it. And I appreciate that explanation. My thought is, as we've talked in the past, that, we'd like to have, agreed it's going to go 2 nights. I can't remember the last time it didn't. And not only that, but the attendance on the second night is typically less than it is on the first night. So we wanted more folks in attendance to opine on these petition articles than less. But again, that's just my 2 cents. Happy to listen to the rest of the board.
And one more comment if I could. So if you're looking at the draft numbers, when you get to Article 43 through 59, those are, all of them are generally of a governance nature, so they all do match as far as type of article.
Does the board want to discuss this? Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, I would agree with Pete. And maybe we can just simply move some of the 14 through 19, maybe we could move some of them to the second night. We have the ability to spend $100 million in 20 minutes and then talk about banning fertilizer for 2.5 hours. So I would agree with you, Pete, that we should try and put some of these the first night when we actually have full quorum there. And though it's frustrating to the people that don't want to talk about that, it's important to be represented during those articles. So if we could move around, Joe, somewhere, I get the first 11, and even 13, but if we could move some of the petition articles in deck and put some funding articles on the second night, I think it would make sense to keep people there.
Don?
I'm just going to put this out there. I mean, we're looking to try to close out the warrant for next week, to print it. And we still have, sitting in here, an article for the local comprehensive plan, which we have not seen fully revised at all. None of us. I mean, I just as a responsible government official, I'm still pitching that we should be doing this in the fall, and it should be devoted as a major discussion so that everybody is buying into this, because unlike the housing production plan, this has consequences. Every time you do something that's a development of regional impact that goes to the county, they're looking at our plan for the next 10 years, and it will have consequences on every large project that goes to them. So I really want to make sure. I haven't seen anything. I'm not sure whether anybody else sitting here has seen something recently, but with
Joe, you want to answer to that?
Well, just that I know that the local planning committee is meeting tomorrow evening. They're going to be discussing this, the whole schedule anyway. However, for the record, I and other staff recommend that it not go forward in May, and I think that comports with the sentiments of the committee. But I did promise them that if it comes up tonight, I would say that they're going to meet tomorrow night, they're going to discuss it, the Director of Planning will update me on that conversation. However, I didn't want to remove it until then, and certainly let you folks decide, because it's your warrant.
And I totally supportful of that as a course of action. I'm not against the plan. I'm against a plan that nobody's read.
Completely understand. So, Joe, do you think you have enough, and to that, I've been speaking to the chair, and everything Joe has said is spot on. We will have information on that next Monday to determine whether or not it hits or not. I'm getting.
I don't want to beat it to death. I just noticed it was there.
And no, you're absolutely right, and that's where it sits right now. Do you have enough to go on, Joe, to reshuffle these a little bit?
I certainly do with regard to the petitioned articles. Again, you've given notice that you may be taking votes on the warrant. Is the board prepared to take an action on local comprehensive plan, or are you going to wait till next week?
I'd be happy to take a motion tonight.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
if they're meeting this week and then they're going to come back to us,
Yeah, like-
we're not voting until next week, why would we vote it tonight?
Because I think everybody is in agreement.
I'm not.
Okay, then that's why. So let's wait until next week.
Sure.
To-
To answer your question, if I may, Mr. Chair, I feel I have sufficient direction on the petitioned articles, the reshuffling, if you will. However, there are some articles you may want to go through, so as much as I want to get my corned beef dinner tonight, I think we have a few more things to discuss.
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
On the financials, the F5 and F6, it shows that we supported them 5-0. It does not show that we placed them. Through you to the town administrator, if that's correct, maybe we should place them.
Which ones?
I
F5, F6.
think the difference was, let me just double check, and you said these were the financials, correct?
Yes.
The water department.
Let me see.
Just housekeeping.
F-15 as well while you're looking. That didn't come out. Apparently F-15.
So I do not have them in my packet, so I think that means that they were accepted and adopted. I know that for last week, the issue was the tables that we include after the explanation, so I can work with staff to confirm that.
And to be clear, that was F5, F6, and Pete?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that was town council that didn't. for
Didn't
the
weigh in, yeah.
F-15, I'm sorry.
If I may, and
Michael?
through you to the town administrator, if it makes, we did vote to accept and adopt them, I'm not sure we voted to place them. Certainly wouldn't hurt to vote to place them again tonight, because
No
an
objection.
action is still an action.
No
I
objection
would
whatsoever.
move that we place Articles F5 and F6, Water Department budget and wastewater department budget on the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
4-0. I'm sorry, did you?
If I may, F5, F6.
F5, F6, 4-0 for both.
Thank you.
Yes. Don?
Yeah, can we just wheel back a second? Because Michael's comment is spot on about the time we spent on discussing these articles. Originally, and this is how I pitched, I think you weren't on the board at that point, originally how we pitched this about wanting us to be towards the front is, if these are truly groundswell ideas that the town wants to consider, we should do it when everybody's there. The longer we wait, it isn't a strategy about how much time you spend speaking on it. It has to do with, if it's a tag at the end of the meeting and there's barely 100 people there and nobody has the guts to call for a quorum, that we're having almost nobody voting on profound things that affect everybody. So the idea was pull them back so that there could be a discussion with more people who might not be there at the end of the night.
Thank you. Joe, good enough to move forward with some reshuffling?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure.
I just want to make sure we're still looking at some of the articles that you haven't finished yet.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
have we heard anything from CPC on their articles? I mean, we're definitely going to place these. Whether or not we support them is another action, but we could do one motion tonight to place them all,
I think it's-
pending them, and that's one action
I think
done.
it's in the packet, isn't it?
It is in the packet in the
So
draft warrant.
the articles are in the packet, and
Their
certainly,
votes, right?
say
I
again?
think their votes are included, the CPC?
Yes.
These articles were endorsed by CPC committee, so these are all their asks. That's why you have the articles. So if nothing else, certainly would look for you to have them placed, because that helps us move the process along. But these are the articles that Community Preservation Committee voted and sent material to administration and legal, for then legal to create the articles you have in front of you.
Mr. Chair?
Hold on, Michael, let me ask you a question, just to build off of your first question. Obviously, we can place. Is there a reason why you would not suggest that we accept and adopt tonight?
There is no reason, I just wanted to do the one before the other.
Understood. Thank you.
And that way, and I'm going to read it as one motion, if that's okay?
Fine with me.
Mr. Chair, I move that we place Community Preservation Act Articles CP1 through CP12 in the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. 4-0, Joe?
And that was to place, correct?
Place.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have no problem making the same motion to accept and adopt, or we could do them one by one if any present board member wants to do it differently.
Don, Pete?
Well, I'm good with the CP 1 through 12.
Yeah, I think that's fine, Michael.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept and adopt Community Preservation CPA Articles CP1 through CP12 as presented in the draft warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe, for all?
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Chair,
Pete?
I go back to the capital outlay plan.
Sure.
I know the meeting did not occur last week because of scheduling. Is there a plan to have a meeting this week that we're aware of?
Do you have any information on that, Joe?
Yeah, I think we're just waiting on the chair to get a quorum, or a commitment of a quorum to set the date.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Michael?
through you,
Yeah.
to Select Board Member Pekarsky, would there be a problem with placing the capital plan? We're not voting to accept and adopt it, but we certainly will be placing a capital plan, maybe subject to change, but
Yeah, so assuming we can be subject to change, and I'm fine with that, and my biggest reason for that is that $40,000 on the school. Smoke alarms, that's not,
if you
Currently
think
there.
it's worth waiting till next week, we're going to go through this exercise, we can wait, but we will be placing a capital.
correct.
So, Mr. Chair, with that,
Please.
I move that we adopt the capital outlay plan C01 in the draft town meeting warrant,
Second.
or in the town meeting warrant.
Discussion, Pete?
The motion was to place, adopt?
No, just place.
Just place.
Okay, so
Place
we're
a
gonna
capital.
strike the word
outlay.
adopt. Right.
That was a capital outlay plan, right?
Joe?
Just for the record, on any of the capital, it's CO, not C0.
CO.
Yep.
And that was to adopt the capital plan in the warrant, Pete. Not to accept and adopt, but adopt is in the article title.
That's the title.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. I
Thank
just
you.
saw that. Thank you
Thank
for
you
the
for the
clarification. Yeah. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe?
Mr. Chair,
Michael?
may I have an explanation on F8? Is that, that's Monomoy Regional School District Middle School Project. You've not voted to put anything in. Is that moving forward, or are we waiting until next year?
So the explanation from administration would be, this language was vetted by bond counsel and presented by the Monomoy Regional School District Committee. and the dollar amount has been affirmed. So these were votes that the school committee took last Thursday at their meeting. I believe in your packet you have additional information.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So what you have is information that was provided at the public meeting on Thursday by the business manager, and specifically, if you... So what you can see on their first page of the memo, the motion that was, there were two motions that were made Thursday evening. The first was confirming the bond council language that you see under the word motion. And then further voted was a second motion, and I believe for that one, they ended it by referencing the entire cost of the project, which is $11,507,030. So what you have in front of you for the town of Harwich, and directly to the member's question about Monomoy Regional School District Middle School Project, referred to as F8, is language that both towns will have. However, the explanation will be crafted based on the board's further discussion. However, the town of Harwich is expecting this to be predicated on a debt exclusion, as we did for the 2.5. So I wanted to make the board aware of the language that was approved by bond council, and that you could also see that there is that embolded statement of Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion, and then we'll take out the phrase companion ballot question and make reference to the ballot question number. Last but not least, there's been some discussion. Borrowing articles require a 2/3 vote. That is correct. However, this is a borrowing authorization vote. The school district is doing the borrowing. The town is authorizing that, and therefore that's a straight majority vote. So that's everything we have thus far on the matter. The school district made the decision in relation to bond council recommendation, rather than rescind last year's 2.5 authorization, do a second authorization for the remainder, and that's what you see in the article.
Go ahead, please.
So it was my understanding that we were contemplating putting this off until a year from now. It was not going to be an article on this town meeting floor. The last conversation that we had was they were studying it, they were looking at it, and we probably weren't moving forward it this year. We also had the discussion about talking about changing the funding formula for capital items so the town of Harwich wouldn't be paying 75% of said project. Has that gone? I know it hasn't gone anywhere because we haven't had the meeting. But I'd like to hear the other board members' comments on putting this before our town meeting this year at an additional $9 million with a lot of unknowns.
Did you have a comment before I go?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I get the nuance that this isn't technically a debt exclusion that we would have. But correct me if I'm wrong, isn't any borrowing that goes to Monomoy or the tech school for that matter, done on the basis of the good faith and credit of the constituent towns? They don't have any direct tax levy.
So I can respond to the last sentence. You're correct. They don't have the ability to tax. I also want to go back to an earlier statement, though. I think the comment was about machinations or something like that. So what I'm presenting to you is simply what has to be done if the town of Harwich wishes to go forward on the project.
Yeah, the reason I said what I said, though, is because it does affect us materially. It's not them. They are not borrowing the money, really. I mean, it's with their credit. It's done by the underlying credit of Chatham and Harwich, or else they couldn't borrow the money.
I understand the concept. I do know that they have their own bond rating through agencies and all that, but the point I'm trying to make right now is administration, and I'm trying not to talk in the third person, I'm trying to talk as an entity, but I've presented this to you because if you wish to go forward, this is the manner in which we were told it has to go forward.
The only reason I brought that up is because there's more than one front going on here that we're battling over. There's the borrowing itself, there's, how much of this has actually been nailed down to the point where we know what it is? Because this has morphed since the summer. I mean, what was it, about $2 million, and then it became $4 million, then it became $8 million, then it became 10-something. So there's no certainty about what it is they want us to actually put in front of a town meeting right now.
Can I build?
I'd like an explanation. I mean, just because they voted 2 days ago or
Sure.
3 days ago, it doesn't impress me if they're asking us to include it on the warrant.
Joe, if I may, question to you.
Sure.
In the paperwork we have in front of us, you referenced $11,507,30 as being the total cost of the project.
Per the memorandum dated March 13, 2025.
Is that the total cost of the project, or is that just the total cost of the assessment to Harwich?
If I may?
Yeah, please.
Again, because these are my documents. On page 1 of the Monomoy Regional School District letterhead to the Monomoy Regional School Committee from Michael McMillan, dated March 13, 2025, regarding the MRMS Restoration Project debt approval. There's an embolded section that reads, background, under the underlined topic of project, third sentence reads, significant testing and further study of the building has been conducted. With the advice of all parties involved, the cost of the project is now estimated at $11,507,030. It's my understanding that the total project is that dollar amount.
Okay.
That is not specific to any one community.
So let me add to the question, if I may, because if you add the $9,730,000 to $2.5 million, you get $11,507,030. Is Chatham paying for any of this project? What would Chatham's assessment be? Because by my math, this would be a $14 million total project.
So, I think I know where you're going with this. Both towns at their respective annual town meetings in 2024 voted to authorize the debt. The debt in 2024 was $2.5 million. Now, both towns are being asked to authorize the debt of an additional $9,007,030.
So both towns approved the entire nut.
Understood. Okay.
Thank you.
So they're both on the hook. Now, then it turns into the assessment piece of the 7624.
Correct.
Prove
Okay.
it quickly before it becomes more.
So, so to build off Select Board Member McCaskill's question about where are we going with this? Do we want to place this? Pete, you and I have a meeting on April 8th. Part of that meeting, in my mind, was not only to discuss the regional formula, but also to discuss the formula to fund capital projects. Obviously, we've run out of runway here. So I personally, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know whether or not we hold it up potentially for a fall town meeting, or if we move forward and try to negotiate in good faith with Chatham, because my feeling is I wish these conversations got started several months ago versus April 8th. But that's neither here nor there. So any board members have any thoughts on whether to place this?
In the spirit of not making a negative motion, I'd have to defer to somebody else. I have no interest in placing this, given the time that they've given us to make a decision on $11 million borrowing and everything else that's coming before us, including their $1.627 million budget increase. I mean, enough is enough, and where are they? Have they offered to come and have this conversation with us? So I'm not sure what our school committee representation is at this point, because they're not here. And the school doesn't seem to be that concerned, other than giving us memos. So, up to you.
Don?
In the spirit of giving Michael a positive motion that can be voted against, I move that we place that article on this annual town meeting. As there has been a failure to gain a second, it has not been placed.
I say we move on, and we'll bring it up next Monday if I can get some more information between now and then. I don't know what information I'm going to get between now and then, but maybe. Joe?
Not necessarily a direct response to what the chair just said, I do know that the town of Harwich, excuse me, Freudian slip, that the town of Chatham, I believe, is planning on closing their warrant. If memory serves correctly, we are Monday, May 5th. They're the Saturday of that week, I believe. But their schedule has them closing their warrant tomorrow evening. In line with that, it's my understanding that they're going to have a presentation on all matters Monomoy from Dr. Carpenter and Mr. McMillan. So that I have suggested that where we're trying to finish our work on March 24th, hopefully we could have the same consideration, if you will, that Dr. Carpenter and Mr. McMillan be available to perhaps answer some of your questions.
And you're saying that that would be on the 24th, our next meeting on Monday?
Only because it's been my stated desire and directive to get the warrant for the
Right.
town meeting done in March sooner rather than later.
Great.
So to recap, my counterparts in Chatham are looking to close their warrant process tomorrow evening. Prior to doing that, they are expected to have a presentation on Monomoy matters by Dr. Carpenter and Mr. McMillan.
Thank you. Joe, I'm sorry, Don?
It's okay, Bill.
That's great.
I do this because I think it's the right thing to do at this point. I'm not going to make a motion for accept and adopt, but I think, especially given the financial questions I've been asking and the process questions about how long we have to accept money from the state and everything, I would like to move that we at least place the Great Sand Lakes wastewater construction on the warrant.
I'll second that for discussion.
Again, I'm not sure how the vote of the board's going to go for whether they're going to recommend to do that or not, but I think the fair thing to do is, it's written, we've got bond council's recommendations for the ballot, and the folks there are pretty passionate, and I think they have the right to have a discussion on town meeting floor, whatever way it goes. So one doesn't affect the other. All I'm asking for right now is to place it on the warrant so that they can have that discussion.
Joe?
I apologize. I was still at the middle school. I was a little bit taken aback.
Detention?
May I ask, was that motion related to placing what is presently referred to as F-17?
Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever the nomenclature is for it.
Yes,
It's just the
F-17.
title is the Great Sand Lakes wastewater
So,
construction.
sorry, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Was there a second to that?
Yes,
All right,
me.
thank you. So, now that I'm fully
Current.
ensconced here in the town of Harwich.
I'll let you current.
Yep. So, yeah, if I could, this is the Town of Harwich's article, prepared with council and reviewed by bond council in anticipation if the select board decides to go move forward on that wastewater construction project. This is the language that the town would rely upon, and this is the article that would accomplish those goals.
And just to be clear, thank you, Joe. Just to be clear, the motion and the second was to place only.
Yep.
So your motion is second. Any discussion?
The discussion I would have at this time is my questions from last week remain the same. We were looking at the cost impact to the taxpayers, and that's in real dollars per thousand. Also looking for an answer of what else is going to have to be done to that pond to clean it, or ponds to clean them. I know that that's an answer that hopefully GHD can get us, but I've reached out to others. It doesn't accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, and it's going to pile on with $70 million in other debt. And though I respect what Select Board Member Howell is saying about placing it, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and it's not 31 million. Tonight I've heard 31 million more than once. It was 35 million last week with an additional amount of millions, and then an additional amount of information that the estimates were going to come in. And I will remind the board, back to phase 2, when we went into town meeting with an estimate that wasn't quite an estimate, we were $10 million off, and we had mud in our face for an awful long time. So though I think Select Board Member Howell is correct in putting it on town meeting floor, at this point, what are we putting there? And I can't vote to support it, and without a fifth member tonight, one other dissenting vote puts us back where we were 2 weeks ago, because we don't have 5, and then it would be a motion to rescind a prior vote and go back to it. So if we had the information next week and we had a little more concrete information to give to the public, though many are passionate about this, what are we actually putting before town meeting floor? The article doesn't say it, and it doesn't get us to where we're being told it's gonna get us. And we do have to think about everything else that was presented tonight, and rough math done, we've spent 50 million, and we have about 400 million to go in 20 years from whenever the clock starts ticking. That was an interesting comment tonight, too. But I'm just not ready. And maybe I won't be ready, so maybe it doesn't matter, but right now, I'm definitely not ready.
Don?
This is just a preface to next week. I understand where Mr. McCaskill's coming from, and I understand that vote to actually support the accept and adopt might actually be a negative one from the board. But you can't accept that which you haven't agreed to place. And the one thing I do know is that's why I've been trying to drill down on some real financial answers. Like, okay, what are we in for? What have we already approved? What is that going to look like if this gets lathered onto it? All that stuff is something that the town meeting can have a discussion on. But the counter to that is June 30th. The draft intended use plan basically becomes Cinderella. I mean, it blows up at midnight, so you don't have anything to accept at that point. And I think it's really important, especially given what town meeting represents, to at least deliver it to them to have a discussion about it. It may very well be that the prevailing sentiment of the town is, listen, we have borrowed a ton, we can't assume more debt, we're just not going to go for this. But that's where it belongs as a discussion. Precluding it from even having a discussion is just fundamentally wrong.
May I respond?
Michael?
And quick response, I hear exactly what you're saying. I just don't know what we're putting before them yet. And really, I feel like as an elected official, I'm being very irresponsible and bitten by phase two, putting something forward. And I understand the debate on town meeting floor, but I feel like my obligation is to do the homework first and not vote to place if I don't support placing. That's just where I am tonight, Don, but I totally respect what you're saying and why you're saying it.
And Mr. Chair, I think you're hearing from two different directions the exact same comment. We need this back on the agenda next week.
If it matters, my vote would not be to support. Pete, do you have anything you want to say on it?
Really not much that hasn't already been said. Obviously I have my own concerns with the language. I agreed that the $32 million isn't the accurate number that we heard. All understanding that piece can be modified, but ultimately in the end, we don't have enough information, in my opinion, and the process is the process. We as an elected board have been elected by the townspeople to decide what gets placed and what doesn't. That's part of our process. Folks can disagree with it all they want, but in the end, that's why we take these votes, to present the best information and opportunities to town meeting. And that's the role that I foresee us taking.
Thank you. I'd be happy to remove my second if you want to.
Yeah,
You can bring it back next week.
Just bring it back next
I'll
week.
remove the second.
Mr. Chair,
Michael?
through you to the town administrator. F15, second page of the highlighted sheet, Joe. Rescind Article 19 from the 2024 annual town meeting. We voted 5-0. There's no legal opinion on that. Did we get a legal opinion on that or no?
Which one's that?
Rescind Article 19 from 2024 annual town meeting, top of page 2 of that
I
sheet.
believe it was presented to council for review. We hadn't had it back yet.
Okay. It's just a box that's not checked. We voted to support it, so obviously the explanation was enough. But if you could check on that.
And if I could, I believe regarding the earlier items, I think they were F...
5 and 6?
F5 and F6, those were placed, the blocks were inadvertently unchecked.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I can continue? Under governance, page 2, top G3 and G4, not voted by the board. nor has legal opined on these. Can we get an explanation on those, if we're moving forward with those?
Let me start with G4. So G4, you referred that topic back to the planning board. The planning board is going to have their hearing prior to town meeting and within the requirements for amending zoning bylaws. However, I've directed staff to have council provide the language. My recommendation is, if nothing else, you certainly place it, because it's being vetted by the planning board at your direction. But I don't believe we have the final language on that one, so you would, are not recommended to do that this evening. And then I apologize, the other one was G3.
3, Chapter 140, General Bylaw Amendment. And I do not see that in the packet tonight under the 1.
Right, so what I believe, so Chapter 140 is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund bylaw. As I had referred earlier, that was the discussion last week with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Chair and the Select Board Liaison to that trust fund. Originally, I understood that they were looking to change language within their article. That's why you don't see it there, and I would argue that we should still keep it, but you certainly shouldn't take any action tonight, because that will either be eliminated or replaced by that attainable housing trust fund topic that the Affordable Housing Trust Chair is working on. So certainly wouldn't recommend any action yet on governance G3, and again, governance G4. Once we have the draft ADU bylaw, recommendation would be to at least place it because of the work that's being done to evaluate it by the planning board. And then finally, staff has confirmed for me that F15 is with council definitively. We just haven't heard back from council. So I would not recommend any action yet on G3, G4, or F15.
I'm going to go to Don unless you
Yeah,
have more.
15, we already acted on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I mean, beyond the council, thank you, sorry, yep.
I'm thoroughly confused as relative to G3. Is that being contemplated with the attainable component in it, along with a revision of the fiduciary document that the trust has, or?
No.
So currently, they're not eligible to spend anything over that, over 80%.
So,
They can't, they themselves, we could, but they themselves can't fund attainable housing at the moment. It's not limited by state law, it's limited by that agreement.
Joe?
so G3 was a placeholder on behalf of an appointed body. That's the short answer.
Okay, great.
So originally, the trust was looking at one topic, now they're looking at another one. This is not being driven by administration.
Well, that would be the flaw that I'd identify if they did bring something forward, because they might bring it forward, but they can't spend it themselves, at least not currently.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Michael?
Moving just quickly, because I believe we could simply add a box that they were reviewed by council, because they were. And if the public wanted that, they could see that they were reviewed by council, so why not add the box that
Thank
they
you,
were reviewed?
absolutely.
And then the last one I have is under governance, acceptance of Mass General Law seasonal community designation, G11. We have not voted to support or not support that yet.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Please.
could,
Yes.
excellent segue to the bullet point under item A, under the 2025 annual town meeting. I'll yield for a moment unless anybody had anything else, but that would be the next substantive conversation to have with you folks this evening.
No, I think we should go there.
All right, thank you. So what you'll see in your packet, or what I hope you can see in your packet, is first the letter that was received last week by me, that was sent by Secretary Edward Augustus of the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, lovingly referred to as EOHLC, and it relates to seasonal communities. Then after that, you can see that there's a multi-page document that I think, that they refer to as the EOHLC's guidance on seasonal communities. After that, you will see, at my request, a document from General Counsel, specifically Attorney John Giorgio, explaining what is happening with seasonal communities. And then last, you can see the draft article with the explanation. So what I would say on that is kudos to Attorney Giorgio. It's my understanding that the governor and the Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities relied upon John Giorgio's best work. So their draft article, or their draft language contained in their letter to me, comports directly with what John Giorgio has written for us. They're one and the same. I will also draw your attention to the draft article to say the explanation that I presently have simply states the statute, Chapter 23B, Section 32B, requires a municipality that receives a seasonal communities designation to accept or deny the designation by a vote of its legislative body in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth and the town's charter. So let me add further, so that's everything for that. Council advised, and I agree, that you should be aware of it. And then, of course, it was sort of heightened by the letter received from Secretary Augustus. As you may know, we are one of the 8 communities on Cape Cod that the governor has preliminarily designated as a seasonal community. And there are benefits that go with that. There are potential drawbacks that may go with that. And there may be costs that go with that. Secondarily, as Attorney Giorgio laid out very well, the governor established an advisory council. I believe the advisory council was established in December of 2024. I know that my colleague and all-around very good person, Brewster Town Manager Peter Lombardi, is essentially a municipal representative, but certainly we consider him as administrators and managers to be our representative. He's on that task force, and you heard Representative Luddy several weeks ago. Although she is our freshman representative, she has also been added to that. So those are all the things we know. I still don't know what a lot of this means, and I was never inclined to present these or recommend these to you per se. However, given the weight of a letter from Secretary Augustus and guidance from council, the matter is before you. I can also tell you that there are 7 other communities on Cape Cod that are in a similar situation, and there may be 7 other responses. I know my colleague in Chatham has been keenly aware of this matter and anxiously looking for guidance. I have been trying to take a wait-and-see approach. So what you have in front of you is a mechanism that if the town of Harwich wanted to accept the governor's designation that we are a seasonal community and all that goes with that, you would place the article and you would recommend, accept, and adopt. As council's put out there, we could also use this as a mechanism to reject the seasonal designation. My recommendation as your town administrator is I don't have nearly enough information to make any recommendation whether we should accept or reject at this time, and that matter is now before you for your consideration.
Board? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just off the top of my head here, do these people talk to each other at the state? I mean, the first bullet point here is acquire year-round housing occupancy restrictions. The seasonal communities statute defines year-round housing as housing for occupancy by persons or families who occupy either rental or other housing as their principal residence for not less than 10 months a year. Not less than 10 months a year. The short-term rental tax is defined as less than 90 days. I repeat, do these guys actually talk to each other?
So many comments that I'm not going to make.
It's rhetorical.
I'll say I went right to the bottom to find out how we get out of it if we get in it. And there's a town meeting
But
vote.
there's two different
Sure.
definitions floating around about what a short-term rental is.
Sure.
Mr. Chair,
Michael?
I move that we, it's not a motion. I think we should punt this until next week, and people can do more homework. I do appreciate John Giorgio, his statement on page, on his memo. And I will tell you where it is for the public, 113, 112. Thank you, whomever that was. I'm not gonna, if we're not gonna vote on it, it's ultimately giving us an out, if we want an out, that we don't have to agree. But if you go back to the letter from EO, whatever it is,
Yeah.
we basically are allowing the state, who have proven themselves lately not to be so great for towns, we're allowing the state to dictate what we do in our town. So if we put this before town meeting without being fully educated on what the effect is going to be, some of the required things on page 109 are a little disturbing, and we're, again, allowing the state to get involved. And given their most recent action with Hack, and Hack spending $5.7 million on a new office while touting affordable housing, I have zero confidence in what the state can do for us on this. So right now I'm a no, but I don't mind looking into it a little more.
Pete?
Needless to say, my skepticism with the Commonwealth has been stated once or twice. Need no further, go no further than town of Middleborough as of late. If you want to go to a few other communities, whether it's Rentham, whether it's Milton, that's all you need to know about some of the fine print. And as I said to Representative Luddy when she was here, the devil's in the detail. And our own council, I think it's maybe the first or second line, ultimately, we expect that the HLC, in consultation with the advisory council, will enact regulations addressing a number of questions regarding the seasonal designation. Tells me there's no devil in the details yet. And I understand the request from the secretary. However, I don't believe it states that this is date certain. So I don't believe there's urgency to this. The only thing it would prohibit is perhaps some of those benefits, tongue-in-cheek, to the town of Harwich. And again, I don't see the urgency with any of those. So I'm happy to have folks do some additional research on this, but unlikely I'm a yay vote even next week.
Joe?
My philosophy when it comes to matters of new initiatives is I never want to be part of the beta test. I always let my colleagues spend their time and money and then see how it went. So that's point number one. Point number two, however, I want to emphasize is while it does require a vote of town meeting, it does not require a vote at an annual town meeting.
Anybody else? I would even go so far to say I don't think we need to burden our town administrator or admin staff looking into this any further. That would be my vote. I don't think I'm a supporter of this time around.
Well, I wouldn't encourage staff to look into it if board members want to.
Yeah, no, one board member said maybe staff can look into it a little bit more, but, all right, so this is, Joe?
Well, I want you to take away that staff is always looking into these matters.
Understood.
If for no other reason, the managers and administrators, we meet monthly. We met last week, and Peter was present, but didn't have anything new to offer. We all got the letter from the secretary. So with regard to the council, there's nothing new coming out of that.
Okay.
And then for the benefit of staff, I'm just looking at my draft numbered list to see if I had that in there.
And while you're looking, Joe, if I could, Mr. Chair, I'll throw you a question as well while you're looking for that. Did any of your colleagues indicate whether or not their boards had already supported or declined the offer?
No. Like I said, the one that I've been watching is Town of Chatham. I haven't seen yet if that'll be in their draft warrant tomorrow night. But no, generally speaking, again, I would say that the 8 towns might go in 8 different directions for right now. And then I think, if memory serves correctly, it's not in the numbering sequence.
Number 44.
Of course, it's in the numbering sequence. It was draft number 44. Thank you for the catch.
No problem.
But if there's no appetite for this annual town meeting, it would be very beneficial for staff if we could strike that from the numbering. I don't need a vote, just guidance.
All right. Don?
I'm going to at least throw one more log on the fire here as long as we're picking this apart. I know it's been talked about for the last couple of years, and it's pretty popular with our state senator, but tiny houses that are movable and that are located in undersized lots, I don't know, when I was younger, that used to be called a trailer park. I mean, is somebody going to explain what the difference is to me and where that shows up as a glaring bright line?
I think we've reached the consensus to take this one off the list for the time being.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Please?
with no comments, other comments about items on here, I think we've been through the list, with the exception of some budgets that we're still working on, and I would imagine we're going to button up next week.
About G5,
G5.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Fruits.
Thank you, and thank you for that catch. So in your draft packet, you have South Street, Main Street, and Sisson Road Safe Routes to School project. Again, the dollar amount comports back to what the director presented last week. I apologize, bear with me for a moment. It has been vetted and reviewed by council, but I believe you did not place or take any action yet, so anything you want to do on that would be helpful.
Mr. Chair,
Please?
I move that we place article South Street, Main Street, and Sisson Road Safe Routes to School project noted as G5 in the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe?
And that was simply placed, correct?
Please.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
I move that we accept and adopt South
Feeling?
Street, Main Street, and Sisson Road Safe Routes to School project G5 for the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
my only comments will be, and I'm going to support this, but I think there's going to be very few school children that actually utilize these sidewalks. I hope I'm wrong, but I think there'll be very few, but nonetheless, the community can also benefit from them, so be it.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
With the absence of anything else on that
Monomoy
list.
Regional School System.
So Monomoy Regional School System and the operating budget, I believe Joe refers to it as Appendix B. What I'm looking at is the FY26 budget revenue source and expenses uses. Old copy, but Joe, I had mentioned earlier, and I would just bring it up to bring it back to us next week as we discuss this. The estimated local receipts of $17,414,000-ish. I'd like to get a little bit of a dive into that with the board next week. As mentioned previously, I'm a little concerned with some of those revenue increases, and before we approve it, I think we should talk about it. That was one.
If I could respond,
Please.
I am meeting with the interim finance director Wednesday to move that discussion forward for next week.
Thank you, appreciate that. And the only other clarification would be, I would like the final percentage, and if it does include the capital or not, for Monomoy Regional School. And then, Mr. Chair, I know you were going to have a conversation related to the Monomoy Regional School
Yes.
budget, so I will defer back to you.
Thank you, Select Board Member McCaskill. I believe this is the last one that we need to discuss, unless there's something you want to go through first.
Well, just that on your, let me just dig out here and get the agenda back. Under your agenda, under the 2025 annual town meeting, item B is related to revolving funds discussion, and there are corresponding draft articles. So certainly no problem waiting until that, but didn't want anyone to think that we were done yet for the town
No.
meeting.
No,
Thank you.
thank you.
So I can yield on that for now. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, before you dig into that,
Sure.
you know, we do things and then sometimes you second guess yourself. And I'm not looking to change anything this evening, however, looking for the appetite of the board. On the petition articles, we made negative motions, and I think most of them were 5-0 or close to it, to not support. a negative motion is one of those things that just doesn't sit well with me, and I didn't know if the board had any consideration to making a positive motion and deciding to vote it, up or down through a positive motion instead. But again, we don't need to do it tonight. We could wait for Julie if she's back next week for a full board, but trying to gauge the appetite.
We've already voted on that, Mr. Chair, if I might. And the positive way of saying it is that we vote in favor of indefinite postponement.
Joe, did you have something to add?
Yes, I was going to be responding to previous speaker, but there's a new previous speaker, so I'll be responding to the immediate past previous speaker, but it may tie to the previous speaker. So it has been helpful for staff for us to add language on your votes. And so to the previous speaker, that may be the net effect, but that's not what the votes were. So to the immediate previous speaker, that is a way to present a positive motion in that you recommend indefinite postponement. That would be the cleanest parliamentarily and in your recommendations for the articles. So I try to match what I think both of you are saying. So if you want to, because I love your parliamentary instincts for sure, it's proper to say that your preference is indefinite postponement because you would not be supporting a motion to adopt.
So my inclination would be to wait for Julie anyway, so we can discuss that next week.
And just for the record, I'm okay with it, however we want to do it.
And I'll also add, while we're on it, petitioner Sandra Hall is not able to make it tonight to respond to any of the questions that this board had regarding her citizens' petition to fund the Charter Commission in the amount of $125,000. But she will be here on Monday of next week.
Great.
All right, on to the school budget. This article is clearly not as simple as it seems. Many moving parts that need to be considered when we discuss and deliberate. Yes?
If I could, just for the record, it may be helpful if you refer specifically to the financial article number or the draft number, because there are
Sure.
two schools.
Yes, yes.
Is that F3?
F3.
That is F3.
Thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Joe, and thank you to the colleagues. Some of the things that this board is dealing with and looking at globally is the school budget, of course. The Monomoy Regional Middle School assessment, now that we found out, is $11+ million. The Monomoy Regional operating funding formula, that's presently in place, and there hopefully will be some future discussion on that April 8th. The Monomoy Regional School District capital funding formula, which again, there'll be a future discussion on that April 8th. The Monomoy Regional School budget, as large as it is but one aspect of what this board is charged with. This board is charged with looking at not only that budget, but the budget of the rest of the town, the operating budget of the rest of the town, and other things that are going to cost us some significant money. So with that being said, Joe, this did not make the correspondence. So there has been a back and a forth with the school committee. And Select Board Member Piekarski had asked our town administrator to send a short memo to the school committee prior to, or I'm sorry, you actually read it, if I'm not mistaken, at the school committee meeting?
Yeah, if I could just clarify, it was
Please.
my understanding that
The board. I'm sorry, you're right.
wanted that letter to
Yeah.
be sent, and I do apologize, I did want it to be in correspondence. It is available, and I did present only under public comment Thursday evening at the Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for the correction. So I have that, and I am going to read this tonight, because there is some correspondence that came from this narrative from our town administrator. So, Dear Chair Gray and Dr. Carpenter, I'm writing on behalf of the direction of the Harwich Select Board to convey their sentiments on the proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Monomoy Regional School District ahead of the vote tonight. Your current budgeted presentation shows a 5.27 overall increase in the Harwich assessment from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2026. That percentage change is significantly higher than the 2.91 increase in the town of Harwich's departmental operating budget estimate, as well as the overall anticipated increase in the town operating costs when factoring in fixed and semi-fixed costs, parentheses, 3.71 increase year over year. The overall Monomoy budget is 4.67 higher than the entire operating costs for the town of Harwich. That is a sobering fact when one compares the overall size and scope of the town versus the school district. Additionally, the burden of the proposed capital expenditure at the Monomoy Regional Middle School represents the largest capital expenditure, in parentheses, via assessment, in fiscal year 2026 for the town of Harwich, excluding wastewater construction. In fact, the total proposed project estimate of $11,507,30 would be the largest single capital project for the town of Harwich for the fiscal year 2026 to 2030 outside of wastewater construction. The directive from the Harwich Select Board to me is clear. Convey to the school committee administration the urgent need for further budget analysis prior to closing out the budget process for fiscal year 2026. Failure to do so, in my opinion, could result in unprecedented actions, such as a general override needed to support the town of Harwich's Monomoy assessment, the success of which is in doubt. I will close on a positive note to say that your team, Dr. Carpenter and Mr. McMillan especially, remain good partners in communicating and strategizing on these complex issues. The same is true for our counterparts in the town of Chatham. As a self-avowed optimist, that's nice, Joe, I am confident that we can work together to sort out these critical matters to the benefit of all, most especially our students and taxpayers. Thank you for your attention to this matter and for giving me the opportunity to present this in person. That sparked a reply, an email to me from Tina Games, who is, I believe, the vice chair of the, am I correct there? The Monomoy School Committee. CC to Betty Gray, Scott Carpenter, Joe Powers. Hi, Jeff. I'm reaching out on behalf of our school committee leadership team, Chair Betty Gray, Chatham, and myself as Vice Chair Harwich. We would like to invite you to join us on our March 27th school committee meeting to discuss the letter that was read on behalf of the Harwich Select Board during this week's public comment. School committee members have several questions and feel the letter was lacking in specificity. We are not clear on the we are not clear on the ask that is being made other than to sharpen our pencils. We'd like to add you to our agenda for discussion regarding the concerns of the Select Board as it relates to FY26 school budget. Let me know if you'll be able to join. I replied, thanking Tina for her email and letting her know that there's 3 opportunities for the groups to get together for more clarity. The first opportunity is tonight. The second opportunity would be next Monday night. And then if questions are still left unanswered, the third opportunity would be for me to go to the meeting on the 27th and offer up some answers to any of the questions that they still may have. So with that, I will turn it over to the board to have a discussion on next steps with respect to the Monomoy School budget. Pete?
Well, I guess the first simple question, the obvious one, they didn't take you up on your offer to come before us this evening.
I don't see anyone online.
Was there a response?
There was a response. The response was the vice chair is in Boston on Monday nights, and she will let the other members of the committee know that I offered for them to be here tonight.
Okay.
So that was the response to that.
I also assume we're going to reach out to school administration for next week's meeting for some clarification on their budget request and their middle school project article.
I would like to invite them here on Monday night, of course.
So hopefully that will be one step closer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get in a little bit to the first email response to you regarding specificity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this board wants to start to manage their budget. We're trying to request that they examine their budget and try to sharpen their pencil. I'm happy to break out the red pen, but I don't think Dr. Carpenter or anybody else in the school system would appreciate that. So I would like them to go through the exercise and see if they can sharpen the pencil. The last number I saw, and I could be wrong, and I'm hoping this can be part of the conversation either next week or that the town administrator can get his answers this week, because I don't believe he has them, is what is the increase in their operating budget, increase or decrease in their operating budget, which I know is an increase, but also broken down, as Joe has it in our draft article, the increase or decrease in their capital, increase or decrease in their transportation, and increase or decrease in their debt numbers. I'd love to know those percentages, because the last I understood is that the operating budget was actually somewhere in the vicinity of 10%. So I understand that the overall ask is more in line with 5.4. However, if the operating budget is 10%, that's a pretty big ask of the town of Harwich. And that was why I asked this board last week to support town administrator sending a letter to the school board asking them to sharpen their pencil. Again, 10% seems to be a bit excessive. This doesn't have to do with me, again, or I think any of us trying to operate their budget. We're trying to be responsible stewards of the town of Harwich. And to your earlier comments, Mr. Chair, balance many budgets into our total budget. And so again, I think it's the prudent thing for us to do and continue. I hope they come before us to have this discussion. I'm happy to have it. But again, I don't know that we need to sit here either tonight or any other night without them with specificity as to what they should reduce within their budget.
Thank you, Pete. Any other board members? Michael?
If you wouldn't mind, I know you did a fair amount of homework and you spoke to, because you relayed that to me, about staff positions versus support positions. Could you just enlighten the board on what that conversation was?
I can. Some data. About 25 years ago, there were 2.1 teachers for every non-teacher in our school districts in America. Today, across the United States school districts, it's about 1-to-1. At Monomoy Regional, it is more than 1-to-1 in favor of non-teaching counterparts. So in another way to say it is, for every teacher in Monomoy, you will see just over 1.3 non-teaching, largely administrative counterparts. There's about a 49, we'll call it a 50-50 split nationally, a 1-to-1. Monomoy runs at 46% teachers, which is 176 individuals, and then 54 non-instructional counterparts, which is about 207 individuals. So it blew my mind when I saw this 709% increase in the number of non-teaching staff members throughout the United States since 1950. 709%. There's a 100% increase in students and a 240% increase in teachers, but a 709% increase in the number of non-teaching, non-instructional staff counterparts nationally. And we actually are a little higher than the 1-to-1 in the non-teaching, non-instructional counterparts. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. The only other comment is, and I think Pete's got it right, let's get them before us so we're not having a conversation in amongst ourselves again. But I had 5.45% down, which I think includes the capital. So even at 5.27%, it's a $1.6 million increase. And so you take a big number, the percentage doesn't have to be very big to make that a big number. Every year we have this conversation, since regionalization. Every year we've had the conversations, the tough ones with our employees, where we have to sit at a number and hold them to that number. And it's always well below 5.27%. Well, I believe our employees are tired of it. And I know every year we hear from the school it's going to get better. But every year they put on paper everything that they want, and we normally approve it out of fear that they're going to immediately go to cutting teachers. And based on the numbers that were just read to us by Jeff, I'd like to understand why we have to have 2 vice principals in each school. I'd like to understand a lot more about their budget, why they think they need this many support. And I can no longer support the it'll get better next year. Because based on the 10% increase in operating budget and the capital costs pushed out and everything else coming forward, it's going to be an additional 8 to 10% next year, and then again the next year. And to the public that thinks we're having a financial crisis, because I've heard that mentioned, we're not. We're trying not to, but we're trying to balance town employees versus school employees. So I look forward to a deeper conversation, but at this point, I can't support their budget.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this brief. I know that there have been some over the last 3 or 4 years that have pointed to me as kind of like the point person that was hostile to Monomoy Regional School, and I'll let my colleagues' comments stand on their own, because I know, and most of the other board members know, that was never the truth, that there was always a serious concern amongst all board members about where this was going.
Thank you, and since Select Board Member Kavanaugh is not here, she did write me a short email that she would like read into the record tonight. She writes, Jeff, as discussed last week, I think the letter sent to the school committee asking them to sharpen their pencils is a bit too late, unless any specifics are provided to them by the collective Select Board or particular members making the request. I wish I stated prior to voting in favor of sending the letter, the only reason I voted yes to the letter was to send a message from our Select Board, because there is a meeting scheduled with Chatham to discuss the budgets, including capital, moving forward, and to talk about the overall school agreement and funding for future years. As mentioned in the meetings in the fall, the school agreement analysis will take several meetings that will also require public engagements, so a thoughtful process can take place rather than having discussions at the Select Board level and then only cause concern for parents and students. We did receive the additional information requested by Select Board members, to my knowledge. So if there are any specifics that Select Board members want to target, they should share them tonight. I don't have any specific items beyond questions I asked at our previous meetings, which were more focused on the other staff ads and a few years ago totaling $250,000. And they answered the status of those positions and the data they are providing to enhance educational needs to date. I hope the Select Board continues to focus on those in the future budgets next year and beyond. Lastly, if we are asking the school to revise their budget, I think we need to provide specific areas to be targeted for reductions. If we don't have specifics, then ask the school if they will review budget items that aren't related to union obligation or student needs, to see if they can find savings this year to show good faith in our partnership. Maybe at 0.5% to 1% would even show good faith, in my opinion. We certainly all understand what inflation has done to municipalities and businesses over the last year, so if they can find any savings, it would be a great message. But we must acknowledge, or at least I do, the ask may be a bit tardy. So, to close, at least for me, you know, the goal, our job as the Select Board is to either vote in support or not in support of this budget. More communication, more discussion, a deeper dive needs to be had. I was hoping it would start tonight. And I'll let it sit there. Board, anything else? Okay. So we'll bring this topic back next Monday, Joe. Hopefully we'll have someone from the school committee here, and we'll invite Mr. Carpenter and Mr. McMillan to answer some questions.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
we just go back to Article 4, operating budget. One other item I'd like to explain would be the Finance Committee's ask to go from $50,000 reserve fund to $125,000 when they've not even exercised the use of the $50,000 fund for the last 10 years that I know of. So I'd like an explanation on why they got to go from 50 to 125 in a year where we're pulling the money together to support any programs we can support.
Okay, Joe, I think we are now at revolving funds discussion.
Yes, thank you. So first, for some context, in your various tracking sheets, if you will, I'm going to make a reference to the draft numbers just because it's easier for me right now, but draft article number 50 is the one that you've already talked about. It will be deleting the Golf Infrastructure Fund reference, because as we know, that is actually a receipts reserved, and that's improper inadvertently in there. So the open item is regarding draft Article 51, which you have in your governance as G6, which is spending authorization under departmental revolving funds. So as I had mentioned last week, we're now away, so the explanation that I have in the draft article is erroneous, based on what we now know to be the new act that the governor enacted back in January of this year. So again, if you're not going to change spending limits, and I have no recommendations to change spending limits, and just put out parenthetically, a change would be up or down, there's no need for this article as presented. So it's my understanding that you're going to have a discussion now on revolving funds generally, and would also just advise you that because we have draft Article 50, if your discussion leads you to contemplate deleting any other revolving funds, I would urge that we build upon Article 50. That would be the overall bylaw change for Chapter 8 of the town. And then last, on this overall topic, remember that if there's any fund balances on any revolving funds, separate and distinct from the infrastructure, because that's not what we're talking about, any balance of a deleted fund would go to the general fund and eventually impact upon free cash. So that's to set up your discussion, and I believe you can also see that staff has taken an earlier effort by our former finance director and sort of re-energized it insofar as giving the known balances of all the revolving funds as of March 13th, 2025.
Thank you, Joe. So I'll open it up for board discussion. The elephant in the room is obviously the 204. If we want to tackle that one first, or discuss any other.
I'm happy to kick off on the 204.
Thank you.
If you don't mind.
Oh, please.
So I know we had talked as a board, whether it was weeks or a month or two ago, about putting some of the items, expense items from the 204 into the operating budget. Is that an exercise that we went through?
I don't believe so.
Sorry, the question was, did you add that to the operating budget?
Did any of the expenses that were currently in this revolving fund for the 204 go to the operating budget?
So then, no. And what I would ask mechanically is that what we'd want to do through finance and accounting is identify either an existing, of course I put it away, let me grab it, in draft Appendix B, an existing line item such as municipal buildings, et cetera, or establishing a new line item for that building.
Right.
What I'm emphasizing is that Department 698, Cultural Affairs, shouldn't bear those building costs, in my opinion, because no other program bears building costs. So we have not done it. It would be a directive of the Select Board. I think you're well within your authority under the sufficiency of notice tonight to do that, either under A or B under the town meeting, but we have not done it mechanically yet.
Okay. And I guess I thought we were heading that direction. That is something I'd personally like to see. And let me just seek some clarification before I dig myself too deep. My assumption, Joe, would be if you were to move some of the expenses into the operating budget, could you not offset that by some of the revenue that is currently going into that revolving fund?
I believe the answer is no.
You cannot.
Revolving funds have never been a source used for the operating budget.
And so, and can I just want to interrupt you, because maybe I didn't say it correctly. So instead of the funds going in, future funds, the FY26 funds going into the revolving fund, could they be sent to the general fund?
Theoretically, the answer is yes.
Okay.
However, We're operating under the restrictions of Chapter 4453E and a half right now, which, and I only, it rolls off the tongue because
How do you
actually,
get an E and a half?
I didn't create the section, and for the record, there's E and a half, E and 3/4, et
So,
cetera.
didn't want to throw you off, I just found out.
That language is embedded in Chapter 8, which is the revolving fund bylaw. And so if you want to put it in your operating budget, you are, my words, avoiding the requirements of 4453E and a half, which you can do. However, I would recommend then you do something on your caps, because the way it works right now is whatever funds are generated related to that, programs within that building, are what funds, and this goes back to the original incorporation of the then middle school revolving fund, so-called, in 2017. If your intent is to have building expenses embedded somewhere in the operating budget, and then reduce the programming under the revolving fund, you'd want to probably reduce the cap of spending and all that. Then we just need to make sure that accounting is aware that, and again, for hypothetical purposes, say we're talking about the lease agreements that the select board has for use of town property. It would have to be a directive of the board to have those revenue go directly to the general fund and not the revolving fund. And that then helps support the general fund operating budget. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and that's truthfully the path I'd like to travel. Now, I don't know if we have enough time between now and next week to travel that path, and I know I may not be in the majority. However, that is a path I'd like to see some of these expenses fall into.
Thank you. Michael?
I'll defer for now.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's good to have one other person agree with me for a change. Let me get this out there right away. I'm totally in support of the 204 being what it is. I mean, there was always a question, and it was an existential question about whether or not we were going to even continue operating it. And I don't want to confuse the two subjects. I'm really in favor of the building. On the other hand, and I know, again, I don't think this is the prevailing majority at the moment, I'm purist on these revolving funds. I view them as a fallback, that it's an incremental thing for uniforms, say, for rec and youth. I don't want to fund every uniform they have, because you can pretty much count on that from year to year. If there's something that needs to happen that's different, like another team or additional stuff, I'm all for that as a modest amount for a revolving fund, but this has morphed into something quite different. This is the way a lot of places operate now. And to the extent that we can nail down the expenses, particularly of the 204, say, okay, we know what the electricity is, we know what the cost of staff in the building is, and we know what the revenue is because we actually have locked that in with some lease contracts or whatever we want to call them, license agreements, but there's still a recognized cash flow. To the extent that we can match those two things up and take them out of the revolving funds and put them in to the actual budget, I think we'd be a far better off town. I mean, the only things that should be in the revolving funds are things that are contingencies or something extra that you didn't account for. But things that you can account for that go the same way every year, year in and year out, we shouldn't, they're not overseen in the same manner by the people who spend the money. When it comes out of the operating budget, there's a lot of scrutiny. But pretty much, we do this by program area. You need something in that program, you're in that program, you know what it is, you order it, and that's fine. And that would survive an audit, I mean, money in, money out. But I don't think that was the intent of anything. We have a town administrator and an administrative office and a finance division office for a reason, for them to be in control and oversight of everybody's budget. These revolving funds tend to operate in the twilight. And I'm on record for years now saying the same thing, so I'm going to say it again. I think to the maximum extent possible, these should be reduced to the minimum amount that's necessary for each of these places to operate. and then put the rest of it that's normal and customary back in the operating budget.
Thank you, Don. Michael?
Town administrator?
Sorry, Joe?
Thank you. I didn't know if the member wanted to speak first. Not to prolong the meeting and not to sound argumentative, but I do want to respond to the previous speaker. If you look at how Chapter 8 is presently listed, you have the revolving fund name, the authorized to spend, the revenue source, and the use of the funds. This board supported a purposeful act, I believe, back in 2022 or 23, where we changed the authorized to spend to make it town administrator or designee. And I was town administrator then, as I am now, so I do want to make it clear, I would not agree with the overall concept that these funds operate in the shadows or any other way that could be described. I'm keenly aware of what my department heads and direct reports are doing on all matters with the budget and the revolving fund. So I do want to put out there that we did change it in that regard. Further, however, I don't intend to weigh in on your conversation, which to me is a mechanical one, so to speak. Whether you want it in the operating budget, whether you want it in revolving funds, I will argue that as the primary branch of government, that is well within your authority. And it really, generally speaking, makes no matter to me. However it is, we will manage it. I do want to put out there, however, aside from the spending limit, which again is the only article related to revolving that you haven't finished yet, I would urge you to rely upon draft Article 50 G8. Take a moment to look at the language which I believe has been in place since 2017, and specifically I'll identify for this one particular topic of 204 Sisson Road Municipal Building, revenue source, funds generated from receipt of lease or fees collected for short-term, year-round, temporary, or otherwise, and room or rooms use and rental. So you'd want to modify that to the earlier question about how you get it out of the revolving fund and into the general fund. You'd want to take one of those phrases away, if not many of the phrases. And then, furthermore, look at what is allowed for the use. The use of the fund allows for funding restorations, maintenance, care, and support. Again, I can speak very freely to this because there's no pride of authorship or ownership. I didn't write that. It's been there for the last 8 years at least. So you may want to contemplate changing some of that, because the point I do want to bear is whatever mechanical efforts you take are exactly that, and well within your rights. None of what we're doing right now violates any laws or any requirements and has been vetted by auditing and everything else. So as you get into this, my request would be if you could focus on the language in the article, in the chapter 8, and if you're going to look at one or any of the several, be mindful of the language you have for how you derive the funds and how you use the funds. And then last but not least, I did find Appendix B. So right now you can see that generally speaking, there are department numbers of 180, which gets to the Albro House, 181, still referred to as the old recreation building, and 191, public buildings and repairs. I would argue, but I could work with finance and accounting, you could rely upon any of those. You could certainly modify Department 191, public building repairs. So that might be a better place for that to go. Or, knowing how the uniform mass accounting system works, there's probably a number somewhere between 180 and 191 that we could rely upon for a specific new line item. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Michael?
Defer to you.
I really don't have much to add. I really don't.
Either way, we're going to be dealing with this on town meeting floor because the finance committee is going to whine about it. Ultimately, I would agree with Pete. If we can stick these into accounts and put them in the account. We did get an email from finance committee with what their wishes are, which we all know at this point they can't let 204 Sisson Road go. Despite what any other revolving fund or anything else, no attempt has been made at all other than this building. I'll stop my negative comments at that. Certainly, I would support putting expenses and expense line items on the budget. As far as the revolving fund goes, here we go, 25th hour, we're gonna talk about changing something, and it's gonna go to town meeting, and let's just say their whining prevails, and the revolving fund article fails, then all of those departments are gonna suffer, and they're gonna suffer miserably, and more importantly, our residents are gonna suffer, which is something the other side doesn't seem to consider. So, if we can do it cleanly, what I'd really like to know is the department heads that we have hired, trusted, and respected, and given them these funds to use and use appropriately, as just explained, what do they need in the fund to make it work? What can we go? Because the finance committees, they want to jump $75,000 on a $50,000 fund, but they want to cut a $300 down to $25,000. As far as I'm concerned, their recommendation is fairly embarrassing to the town and every department head that is running their revolving funds correctly. So I'd like to see, to the town, and through you to the town administrator, what it looks like. What it looks like, what we can actually get done, and what a revolving fund would look like. And certainly willing to concede on the expenses. But just because they've lost everything at 6 town meetings, they're gonna continue to focus on this to the detriment of the town, the residents, the employees, and this whole process. Meanwhile, ask for a $75,000 raise in their own account they don't use. So I could go along with it, but we have to see it. And I don't know how quickly we're gonna see this before we get to town meeting. And I would just as soon let them make a mockery of themselves and the revolving funds on town meeting floor and defeat it again.
Thank you, Mike. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make one thing perfectly clear. I wasn't casting any aspersions on the current administration, nor am I just targeting 204.
No, you're not. Just make that clear.
Okay, this has been a long-held feeling on my part, and this isn't pejorative either. I'm just going to put it out there. We damn near built a pet burial ground and spent $100,000 putting sidewalks in, and it should have been a capital project, and somehow it flew under the radar, and a lot of money got spent for something that never would have happened if it had been a direct appropriation. So I agree with Michael. We need to get the consensus from each of the managers. Like, what is that increment that you need to feel comfortable so that you don't get crippled during the year and not have enough softball uniforms or whatever? But I'd like to get back to the basics about why those funds were set up. They were not set up to run everything. They were set up to augment things so that when you had something that was unforeseen that happened, they had some money in the kitty. I mean, it's gone way beyond that, and that's why I feel the way I feel.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
And quick response to that, Don, I get that you're looking at it more globally than 204. I'm commenting on our finance committee. That's the only thing they can focus on. So rather than look at all of these funds for this town meeting, I hope that we can all agree that it's too late for that. And then put it on the agenda for the beginning of next year, and then get to the point that you've been talking about for years, and I recognize you have. But looking at it now and going into that, we're really only a week, maybe 2 weeks away from voting it, and then amending the operating budget on town meeting floor potentially, and a revolving fund article, it sounds like a mess to me. And I really don't think that we're in any position to focus on this right now. And hopefully the finance committee will really recognize and dig deep about what they're really trying to do.
Pete?
And real quickly, well, as quickly as I can go, there are a few that I would like to see adjusted at some point, but I agree that we're at the 11th hour. I don't necessarily want to create chaos. Regarding 204, if we're able to make some adjustments over the course of the week and come back next week with a solid recommendation on some of the expenses, and again, I'm not looking to get the account down to $25,000. I don't think it's realistic between now and then. But again, this is going to be a multi-step process, I think. And to Selectman McCaskill's point, we need to bring this up early next year and try to iron out anything, because again, personally, I think there's a few that could be reduced just based on prior spending, based on the report we saw from the auditor. I think I keep saying auditor, from finance, the previous finance director. Mm-hmm. And there's probably a couple that I would recommend eliminating altogether. But the other thing I'll note is that there's been conversation about salary and wage, and although I don't have the specifics on who the employees are, there are at least 4 of these funds that pay salary and wages. It's not just that one building. So again, I think those are the things we want to dig into a little bit and clarify, and give a better explanation to those that have any questions. But other than that, if we can do something that makes good business sense come next week, I'd be happy to explore it. But again, yeah, I'm not looking to blow everything up at the 11th hour.
Joe?
Thank you. To the previous speaker, I can certainly do that, and again, I have my meeting, it's usually Tuesday with Ed on Wednesday, on all matters of the budget, so we can certainly get into that. Now, the next comments are not necessarily to the immediate previous speaker. But if you look at the analysis that's been updated by staff, and it's the last page of the Town of Harwich revolving funds document, where there's a specific breakout regarding 204 Sisson Road. As you talk about, what I've called the mechanical processes, it can absolutely be done and may be able to be done in short order with several caveats and understanding. So this is going to cause our numbers to go up on the operating budget. Yeah, they're not massive numbers, but we all need to keep, note of the date and the time and all that, and refer everyone back to this moment and next week's moments. When you look at the breakdown of year-to-date expenses, so the first thing that jumps out to me, is there are salaries and wages related to the custodian that maintains that building. And so that, those funds would have to be accounted somewhere else. And those, I would argue, would fall under Highway Public Works. That's where all the other custodians are. And so that could be moved over fairly expeditiously. Part-time program aid, same thing. That should go into Department 698, which is the Cultural Affairs Program, because that part-time program aid is a program aid for cultural affairs. Everything else on the list, which is the vast majority of the 140,000 expenses year-to-date, are pure maintenance and support of the building itself. And so the irony here for me, and I think that's the right word, is, and I think a previous speaker, and I'll just say it, Board Member McCaskill, I think, has always been onto something insofar as, if this, sorry, let me be very clear. What I'm about to say is not in any way related to the Select Board. Again, I think I've emphasized greatly, I fully understand our roles, each of us being branches of government. It's for any others, and I will refer to the third branch of government and the Finance Committee. If there truly is an endeavor to do that work that you want us to do on the board side, we can absolutely do it. And if there truly isn't about programming per se, then no one else should have a problem with the program aid for the Cultural Affairs Department being embedded in the Cultural Affairs Department. That's not an enhancement of services. That's been an ongoing thing that we've all been aware of. And I would remind everybody else that this board supported administration in adding a program known as Department 698, Cultural Affairs. So if we can recognize that the custodial needs and the program needs can move over to existing budgets, then it becomes much cleaner to add that other department that I talked about, a 190 something, if you will, to account for all the other costs. Or we could also keep them where they generally are elsewhere, under Public Works. But I don't then want to put a bullseye on Public Works because, oh my God, their budget went crazy. So again, it is allowed under Chapter 44, 53E and a half for the support of staff. Those salaries and wages are allowable. The support, the maintenance and care of the building, those expenses are allowed. So all of that can be done mechanically fairly easily. I just feel an obligation as your first line of creating an operating budget that we don't, as a community, inadvertently hurt the programming that's there. Again, I haven't heard that from the Select Board, and I find that immensely gratifying. I, however, am concerned about other voices in the community, quite frankly. Thank you. So mechanically, I think we're much closer than I would have thought originally to get that done.
Okay. And just quickly, yeah, I'm certainly, I don't consider it an enhancement of service. I consider it a reallocation of funds within line items.
Yep.
And again, that goes back to my prior question of, and this is where it may get too complicated, and we look to do this next year, but instead of all the revenues going into that revolving fund that are currently being directed in there for FY '26, they get redirected into your operating budget.
Correct.
So,
Yep. So the mechanical pieces are in place with draft articles and the operating budget for sure. And I am hopeful that when we meet on Wednesday, we might be able to get that done to update all your documents to that effect.
Anything, Don?
I do have one question through you, Mr. Chair. Joe, with the revolving funds, we're approving the glob for each department. It's not line item by line item, is that correct?
So you had me at the word glob.
Yeah.
As I understand it, so what you're working under is Chapter 8. And so the table there, that's what you're doing. And even if you modify the tables line by line, you're allowing for revenue to be generated and for it to use for those purposes. If I understood the question.
Yeah, and the reason I'm actually asking that question is there is a substantive difference if it slides over. I can't take 4 copying machines and make them into a person in the budget. In the revolving.
It's alchemy, yep.
Yeah, but in a revolving fund, you can kind of do that as long as it stays within the purpose of the organization and it's within the total global amount of money that's allocated to them.
Yes, but if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
that is not something that occurs with me, with this administration. When we go through procurements, because we need a new copier in administration, as luck would have it. So that copier thing's going to happen, and hopefully within this fiscal year. That way you don't get those horrible streaks that look like some disgusting bodily fluid. That doesn't occur now under this administration because of this select board. I'd be a fool to do that. You wouldn't let me get away with it, and I wouldn't even try. But I appreciate sentiment. The future is what we're concerned about.
It's the belts and suspenders approach. I get what you're saying, except that administrations change, boards change.
Correct, yep.
But,
Department heads change.
right, but you can't change mass general law. And if
Right.
we're in a line item
Yep.
budget state, and if it's in our actual budget, it can't be reutilized somewhere else. That was the only point I was trying to make.
If I may just.
Sure.
Again, for the record, I enjoy these conversations because this is the essence of what a select board does. This is the essence of what an administrator does. It's all the other noise that is irritating, but this is very invigorating and helpful for me because this is the nub of what both of us are supposed to do as 2/3 of the government. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. And here's what I heard collectively from this board. The 204 is a gem, and we need to continue to support the 204. At least that's what I heard. And I feel the same way. And then by next Monday, Joe, you'll have something that looks like a plan to move this forward regarding the 204. Is that accurate? Did I hear?
No,
Okay.
not a plan for the 204 per se.
A couple of things.
Allowing for operational expenses, both programmatic, personnel, and supportive building to be embedded elsewhere in Article 4 and Appendix B. But again, you folks need to drive the conversation of if you then want to modify language in the revolving funds going forward. You can do this, but if you don't do it all together, I agree with the previous speaker. We run a tremendous risk of doing harm last minute to budgets and departments. And I'll just put it out there theoretically, theoretically and governments-wise. There's nothing that prevents you from amending general bylaws and doing financial things at a special town meeting if you wanted to.
And that is the last thing I heard, is we don't want to mess with this too close and run the risk of really doing harm to our staff and the programs that they run. So I'm a little lost as to what we're looking for next Monday.
I feel like I have guidance, but if I could sort of round out the entire conversation.
Round it out for me, because
Sure, what staff's working on is trying to get you as complete as possible, a full-on warrant, which is all 60 or maybe 58 articles now, if I have my numbers right. But that also includes a draft Appendix A, an annual town election warrant that includes ballot questions. Again, get it to you, you can cut it down. We're going to be hard pressed to add up. So there's going to be more in there that you can edit down. An Appendix B, operating budget, that goes back to Article 4, the sources and uses conversations and all of that. And capital, the plan, and Appendix C. Because that's it, it's everything that goes in. And to an earlier conversation about, say, the net effect of, I forget the number, but the Great Sand Lakes construction project. So we, Administration and Finance, would have that as part of your discussion, part of the explanation, but also in the intervening pages of your warrant, which you're also going to get. It's those definitions we have. It's what is the net effect if everything in this warrant were adopted on the tax rate? If you remember that page in there? It's going to be all of that. That's the effort for next week, and capturing everything you've talked about tonight. Because I'd rather give you more, and as a former writer, have you edit down, because we cannot, based on scope, case law, exceed what's printed. So that's the effort.
Michael?
And just to add to that, Joe, if we can, if we're looking at expenses and taking X amount of expenses out and putting them in other departments, clearly the other branch of government's not going to be happy if we leave a $300,000 revolving fund in play. So a recommendation from administration on what that revolving fund would look like and still be able to operate the current programs and continue to expand would be very helpful for a much shorter conversation next week than not. The 25,000 is laughable, and quite frankly, I'm ready to battle that one on town meeting floor, and I hope they are. It's a program that works, but we need to see from you what it looks like so that the department heads aren't going to be affected.
And thank you. And to that end, I'll be looking to have those department heads meet with me as soon as we can this week for those conversations. There was another point, but I lost it overall, other than,
I just wave when they go.
that's all I got.
I
But thank
want to say thank you for all your input and help there. That was really great.
you. And for the record, my pleasure, my job.
You just did. Thank you.
That's always my go-to.
All right. Town Administrator's Report?
Sure, and the light of the hour, and again, St. Patrick's Day, again to everybody, happy St. Patrick's Day. But remember, this is just a precursor to the really important holiday this week, and that, of course, is St. Joseph's Day, which is Wednesday, March 19th. Enjoy a Zeppeli, have some nice pasta. That concludes my administrator's report.
Select Board Report. Pete?
Nothing tonight.
Don?
Nothing.
Michael?
Nothing.
I have nothing.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.